Our first story tonight comes from someone who believed they were living a perfect, idyllic life. But as they discovered, the walls of a beautiful home are no defense against the darkness that can lurk just outside the front door. My family and I lived a life many would call the American dream. We had a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood, and we were a tight-knit group. My parents, my sister, and my two brothers were genuinely happy. This is the story of the night that shattered our peace forever. It was a typical weeknight around 11 o'clock. I was in bed, drifting towards sleep, with school on my mind for the next day. My father was the night owl of the family. He ran a successful online business from home, which gave him the freedom to set his own hours. He'd often be in the living room watching television long after the rest of us were asleep. My mother, supported by my father's success, dedicated her time to us. She was always the first to wake up, making breakfast and driving us to school. She cherished her quiet evenings, usually retreating to her bedroom early with a book. On this night, everyone was in bed except for my dad. And it's a blessing he was awake, because if he had been asleep, our story might not have had any survivors to tell it. The silence was broken by the chime of the doorbell. My dad told us later that he felt a prickle of annoyance and suspicion. He walked to the front door and peered through the peephole, but the porch was empty. He assumed it was a prank, some local kids playing ding-dong ditch. It had happened at our old house, so the thought was familiar. He dismissed it, but a sense of unease kept him alert. About 10 minutes passed, the doorbell rang again, a more urgent and insistent sound this time. Frustration mounting, my dad strode to the door and pulled it open without checking the peephole. The sight that greeted him froze him in place. Standing about 5 feet from the doorway was a woman in her late 40s. Her hand trembled as she held a large kitchen knife. She was muttering to herself, her eyes wide and unfocused. My dad couldn't understand her words, but he knew he was looking at pure danger. He yelled at her a single sharp command to get off his property. Then he slammed the door shut, the deadbolt clicking loudly into place. His calm facade shattered. He raced through the house, gathering us children from our beds and herding us into our parents' bedroom. He quickly explained the situation to my mother, telling her to call 911 and report an armed intruder. He told us to lock the bedroom door behind him and to stay put. He was very clear about his next instruction. We were not to open the door for any reason, no matter what we heard, unless he used a specific code word. The word was love. Only then would we know it was safe. The fear in his eyes made it clear this was not a drill. My father, a man who believed in being prepared, retrieved his 12-gauge shotgun and his 9mm handgun. He stood guard in the living room, pacing, his ears straining for any sound. A few minutes later, his worst fears were realized. The terrifying sound of shattering glass erupted from the dining room. He rushed toward the noise just as a man was climbing through the broken window, a machete gripped in his hand. The man lunged, acting on pure instinct and adrenaline. My dad raised his handgun and fired. The intruder fell to the floor, dead. Back in the bedroom, we heard the gunshot and panic exploded. I tried to run out to my dad, but my mom grabbed me, her voice trembling as she insisted we had to trust him and stay hidden. Initially, my dad had only seen the woman. Now, standing over the body of a man he had just killed, he was consumed by a new level of terror. This wasn't a lone disturbed person. It was an organized attack, and there could be more of them. He fought to maintain his composure as the sound of approaching sirens filled the night. The police arrived swiftly and secured the scene. During their search of our property, they found a third accomplice hiding in the bushes near the side of the house. He was also armed. The woman with the knife, however, had vanished. She was never found, and that fact haunts us to this day. We live with the constant gnawing fear that she might return, perhaps with others, to seek revenge. My father faced no legal repercussions. The court ruled it a clear case of self-defense, a justified act to protect his family. He made us wait in the bedroom until the body was removed and the worst of the blood was cleaned from the dining room, but we all saw the aftermath. The dark stains were a grim reminder of the violence that had invaded our home. My father had to completely renovate the room to erase the physical evidence, but the psychological scars remain. He saved our lives, but taking another, even to protect us, changed him forever. That family's terror came from a coordinated, malicious plan, but sometimes the most frightening encounters are born from pure, unpredictable chaos, as our next story illustrates. I was in my bedroom watching television, just about to fall asleep, when the doorbell rang. It was late. well past 10 at night, which immediately set me on edge. I sat bolt upright and shook my husband Mark awake. He started to get up to look outside, but I stopped him, suggesting we check the Ring camera on my phone first. I pulled up the app, but the screen was empty, just our silent porch under the dim light. It was strange, but with no obvious threat, we tried to settle back down. Mark told me to go to sleep and that he would stay up for a while just to keep an eye on things. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Mark was rushing toward the front door again. The bell had rung a second time, but just like before, whoever it was had vanished by the time he got there. This time, Mark slipped on his shoes and went outside for a quick patrol around the house, checking for anyone hiding in the shadows. He found nothing. The night was still and silent. When he came back inside, Mark was convinced it was the neighbors' children up to their old tricks. We had caught them ding-dong ditching us last summer and had a firm talk with their parents. We agreed we would simply ignore it if it happened again and speak to the parents in the morning. In that moment, it was the only explanation that made sense. I wish it had been them. I wish it had been that harmless. We both fell asleep, but we were woken a third time, not by the doorbell, but by a heavy, methodical thudding against our bedroom window. The window was only a few feet from our bed, and the sound was so loud and close, it felt like an attack. We both leaped out of bed, our hearts pounding. "Okay, enough is enough," I said, grabbing my phone to dial 911. I followed Mark as he cautiously went outside to confront whoever was tormenting us. As we rounded the corner of the house, we saw him. A man was standing by our bedroom window. He was wearing nothing but underwear, his skin pale and slick with sweat in the moonlight. He just stood there staring at us. His face was a perfect, chilling blank. It was like there was no one home behind his eyes. "Hey, get out of here. The cops are on their way," Mark shouted, his voice steadier than I felt. The man turned and began to run across our backyard. But then he stopped. Lying on the grass was our son's baseball bat, left out from practice. Our son was thankfully at a friend's sleepover. The strange man picked up the bat, turned, and began walking slowly, deliberately back toward us. We didn't hesitate. We fled back into the house and locked the door, knowing we stood no chance against an unhinged man with a weapon. He began a rampage, smashing our patio furniture and garden decorations. At some point, he cut his arm badly on a broken lantern. He then walked to our living room window and, using his own blood, smeared the word "kill" across the glass. He continued his circuit around the house, smashing every window he could reach. It was during this destructive spree that the police cruiser screamed into our driveway. He attempted to run, but was quickly intercepted. They had to tase him to get him to drop the bat and surrender. We later learned he was a patient who had escaped from a nearby mental hospital that very day. The whole experience was surreal and terrifying. Now, both my husband and I own handguns, and he keeps a shotgun in our safe. We've decided that when our son is old enough, he will learn how to safely use a firearm as well, so that he can protect himself if he ever faces his own life or death situation. Facing a threat with a partner is one thing. Facing it utterly alone is a different kind of nightmare, as this final story reveals. It was the first weekend my parents had gone away without me. They went on a short vacation to a casino about a half hour from our house. I was 15 at the time, and I have to admit I was terrified to be home by myself for the whole weekend. I'm an only child, and despite my telling them how anxious I was, my parents didn't seem to think it was a big deal. The only comfort was knowing that if anything happened, they weren't too far away. Despite my anxiety, I eventually fell into a deep sleep. I am a notoriously heavy sleeper. Alarms and phone calls rarely wake me up. But that night, something broke through. I was roused by the incessant buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. My screen was lit up with over a dozen missed calls and texts from both my mom and dad. I finally answered, and my mom's hysterical voice flooded my ear. She was nearly screaming, asking if I was all right. When I mumbled that I was, she burst into tears of relief. She told me someone was at the house. She had received a motion alert from our Ring doorbell and watched in horror as a man crouched on our front porch, staring directly into the camera lens. She said they were already on their way home, about 20 minutes out, and that my dad had already called the police, who should be arriving any minute. My mind struggled to catch up. It felt like a bizarre dream until I heard a soft knocking sound on my bedroom window. That's when the reality of the situation crashed down on me. Panic took over. I scrambled out of bed and ran through the house, checking the locks on the front and back doors. Then I grabbed a kitchen knife, ran to my parents' bedroom, and hid deep inside their walk-in closet, burying myself behind a rack of clothes. A moment later, I heard the sickening sound of a window being forced open downstairs. I had no idea it had been left unlocked. I could hear the intruder's heavy boots stomping on our hard tile floors. I heard the rustling of a backpack as he moved through the house, gathering valuables. He went into my room and took my old electronics and my PlayStation 5. Then the footsteps stopped outside my parents' bedroom door. I held my breath, praying it was the police, but I knew it wasn't. The door creaked open. Every footstep inside the room felt like a drumbeat, counting down my final seconds. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought I might faint. And then he knocked. It was a faint, almost gentle tap on the closet door. A cold shiver traced its way down my spine. He knew. I knew I couldn't just wait to be found. I had to do something. It was him or me. As I pushed myself to my feet, the closet door swung open. At that exact same moment, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the night air. The man was huge, easily twice my size. He saw the knife in my hand, but he overpowered me effortlessly. He grabbed my arm, shoved me onto the bed, and struck me hard across the side of my head. He then grabbed my parents' small safe from the closet and bolted out of the front door. He managed to get into his car and speed away just as the police were entering our neighborhood. A high-speed chase ensued for over 10 miles, ending only when he swerved off the highway and crashed his car into a large sign. He was pinned in the wreckage and arrested. An officer stayed with me, calming me down and gathering information until my parents arrived a few minutes later. They rushed to me, holding me tight, their faces streaked with tears. It's been over a year, and I rarely stay home alone anymore. The man who broke in is still in jail awaiting sentencing. He's an older career criminal, so I know he'll be locked up for a very long time. I just hope he gets what he deserves.